hospitals, which are private. So everybody has to be on the same sheet of music, or this doesn't all come together. So I just kind of wanted to go through it and try to keep you awake. So we're going to talk about the process of emergency operations, talk about how I'm going to show you the general outline and then just fill in the blanks. This is how we do it in this area. And then so that you can begin to understand what your piece is. And one of the things that your instructors are also going to give you is information about Medical Reserve Corps. When you graduate, you may work in a hospital environment, you may work with a fire department, you may work in a doctor's office or some freestanding area. But if you want to be able to volunteer during that kind of a scenario, you need to belong to the Medical Reserve Corps. And we have a very active one here in the Hillsborough County area. What it allows is for you to be called up. You're part of the team cleared before an incident, and you have disability and liability, which is a very big deal when you go somewhere to volunteer. You think about what would happen if you went into an area where there was just a hurricane and you hurt yourself and couldn't work. You know, if you just showed up to volunteer. So this is a structure that allows you to do what you want to do and gives you a little protection. So that information will come to you from your instructors also. So why do we want to organize our response? This is a classic. This was a classic example of a tornado in the Midwest, and what happened here that you could watch, and people did watch this, is that citizens, healthcare providers, paramedics, fire departments, people from surrounding communities rushed into this area. They went to one of these places and they would move all the rubble and pile it over here. And then 45 minutes later, another group would come in who really just wanted to help, and they would move that same pile of rubble over here. There was no organization. They were looking for bodies. They were trying to help, and there wasn't any organization. There has to be better organization than this, or you waste, a lot of people waste good effort and good resources not being organized. And of course, this is why we get all excited about here in Florida. We have a history of getting a lot of practice, at least for evacuation. I think I probably shouldn't say this. I think the coastal areas, their evacuation planners, they come to Hillsborough County now because we've been pretty well organized here. Wasted relief supplies. After several of the hurricanes, people from all over the country started sending stuff, going through the closets, sending clothes, canned goods. It ends up in hangars, it ends up damaged, it ends up unusable. There has to be a way to receive that kind of stuff and get it to the people that need it. So there needs to be organization. Pandemic flu, what are you going to do? You know, how do you provide care in a safe environment? Who's doing what? Who's in charge? The health department actually is in charge. Where are you going to send all these people? What if we have a smallpox outbreak? Which hospitals are going to say, hey, we'll be the smallpox hospital? That's not going to happen. The health department is in charge. We're going to have to set up alternative care centers, and we need to do that in a safe manner, and we need to practice it and make sure we know who's going to staff it, who's going to work there, who's going to work there safely, what happens if you're exposed, so that you're protected as healthcare providers as well. Where do we transport these patients to? What happens when you call 911 and we're in the middle of a bird flu outbreak, and you go to the home and it's a patient with a fever and they want to go to the hospital? What if it's a patient with a fever and chest pain? You know, the transport protocols will be all different. So this all really needs to be well organized, and we all need to be on the same page so that we can use our resources to take care of our citizens. This is a drill. I just wanted to show you that when we drill, we usually play for real. We don't have all the same toys that we had here at the Sun Dome. This was an alternative care center that we set up for avian flu pandemic care, and we were keeping patients there. They were not going to the hospital. We could do everything up to, but not including intubation. Anybody that needed to be intubated would then go to hospital critical care, but anybody that needed supplemental oxygen, we needed a lot of respiratory therapists here, and we had a lot of docs. This was not a place where we were doing surgery and we were doing fast exams and taking care of trauma. This is a place where we're giving people supplemental oxygen, giving them a chance to survive if we needed to, without overwhelming the hospitals. This would be the place where you would transport to as a paramedic if your patient did not need to be intubated but did need care that they could not deliver to themselves at home. So there's different kind of drills. After I talk about the general setup of the community, I'm going to talk about your drill for a few minutes. This is a typical triage that was set up. All the hospitals, when we did the pandemic flu countywide drill, set up their triage outside of the hospitals. They didn't want these people presenting in the hospitals and exposing other patients. So the first thing that would happen is you'd come into this area if you had signs or symptoms with pandemic flu and you did not need to be intubated, you were being shipped to the alternative care center. Okay, so we have different levels of response. We have the local level. You're at the local level for your drill. This is the local level. The patients, the victims are coming from the stadium, and I'll talk about that. But there's also regional, state, federal, and international. What happens if we have some sort of a biological event in Tampa, and they're having the same thing in Minneapolis, and they're having the same thing in Seattle, and they're having the same thing in New York? Well, when your local resources are gone, what do? How do you get more resources? And there's a setup for this. You don't need to have 27 people on the phone trying to figure out who to call at the state level to get more resources. That's not your job. That's not my job. There's somebody designated in every system, and you need to understand the system wherever you work, end up where you work, because you don't want to be wasting anybody's time, and you don't want to be tying up the phone lines. You want to just, report to the person you're supposed to report to. Here's our needs. That person needs to know where to go to get you logistical or operational support. They need to know how to do that. You don't need to do that. You need to do your job and know what your role is. So if we're overwhelmed here, and Orlando is overwhelmed, and Miami is overwhelmed, the state then goes to the feds. And if we need help beyond that, then the international community kicks in. Those communication. Those lines of communication are established. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. But if you have some good ideas, it's always nice to volunteer, not in the heat of the battle usually, unless it's going to make a difference. Now I'm going to go through these next slides pretty rapidly, but I want to show you what the involvement of the entire community is, what needs to be in place for a disaster management program to work. ESF, Emergency Support Function. There are 17 of them. There won't be a test today. I don't think there'll be a test, right? You guys aren't getting tested on this. I don't know. Emergency support functions. It's a discretely defined set of responsibilities. It's split up so that you know what your job is. You have the authority and the responsibility to take care of business, and I'll go through them. And it's a concept of operations that is universal across the United States, and in fact in many countries they use the same set of emergency support functions. There are some cultural differences in other countries, and the resources that you have to throw at this can be very different, but I'll show you what we have here. Okay, ESF 1, Emergency Support Function 1, Transportation. So we have a localized disaster, we need to get people out of there. We have a hurricane coming, we need to get people out of there. Who's providing this care? Who do you think in our community does this for us?
Police.
Police? How are they going to drive people around? No, they direct traffic. We have security issues. Every one of these emergency support functions has security issues, so the police are part of all these. But who's going to transport? Mass evacuation.
Mass transport. Buses.
Buses, right. What we have in place in Hillsborough now for people that don't have cars, if you're not medically needy, there's bus routes. And the school buses, because school's been canceled, the school buses and the hardline buses, we have mutual aid in place. We have the routes established. They go in the newspapers. It's that crap you ignore because it's not on the sports page. But we have that in place. So in our community, we have school buses, and the Sunshine Lines help. Now, how about people that are kind of medically needy? People that are on home vents, people that are on oxygen at home with those compressors, people that have feeding tubes, pumps, visiting home nurses doing wound care. Then we have BLS and ALS transporting those people, the medically needy, to medical support shelters. Who works at the medical support shelters? That would be Medical Reserve Corps and Department of Health right now in our community. That's how that works. Okay, during a mass evacuation, then we have substantial evacuation. And always at the last minute, some nursing home decides that they need to evacuate. And they're trying to get Tampa Fire and Hillsborough County to show up and evacuate people, and the winds are already getting high. We have urged all these people to be part of the system and be proactive and get the heck out early. Don't wait till the last minute because we're not sending our guys out when the winds hit 45 miles an hour. Boom. Sorry, a little bit too late. Some of the nursing homes we were able to send school buses to. Our area tends to be very well organized. Other areas, it's a disaster waiting to happen. All right. Communications, this is always a big deal. This is one of the things during your drill that we're going to be it's primarily a training drill, but there will be, we will be being evaluated. There will be evaluators evaluating us for the things that the feds look at to see if they're working and to see if they need to fund more development. Disaster response, communications. We have a patient that was triaged green. We moved him into the green area. Now he's having difficulty breathing. How do I get in touch with a transport officer to let him know that this patient needs to be transported? It wasn't green. The patient's deteriorated. How do I do that? Do my communications here on scene at this incident, are they working? How does that transport officer know what hospital has an empty bed now? Because we've sent 500 patients out already. So all those communications need to be in place. There's a riot at Tampa General Hospital. Memorial Hospital's been contaminated. How do we know not to send patients there right now? How do all those communications work? I'm out of 4x4s in my alternative treatment center. How do we get more supplies? There is a communications network for all of this. There is a model to be used, and you'll see that, and we are going to evaluate it on that particular piece during this drill. Also, what you don't see is that the Emergency Operations Center in the city and in the county will stand up, and they will have a skeletal staff there that are doing bed counts at the hospitals for you. They are looking at staffing at the different hospitals. They know which ERs are overwhelmed. They know which operating rooms, or which hospitals have open operating rooms and open critical care beds. They know when we hit critical mass to start calling the counties around us for mutual aid. So that's all in place. So the EOCs are standing up to, for this drill, they will stand up with a skeletal staff just to get you what you need. They are giving you logistical and operational support you asked for. There is a tree down. There is a road that is blocked. We know not to send the rescue units that way. They can't get there. We know to tell them to reroute. Communications are critical. If you don't have good communications, that's a problem. Okay, Public Works and Engineering. After a hurricane, Bay Shore's flooded. Trees are down here, here, and here. Electricity's down over there. What are we going to do first? First thing they do, actually, one of the first tiers they put back online are the hospitals. They go for the electrical grids around the hospitals first. We need all of these things to be in place. I cannot send somebody home from a special needs shelter who's an asthmatic or who has some piece of equipment that depends on electricity if there's no electricity in his area. How do I know that? Who do I call? Who's taking care of that? Public Works needs to be communicating with everybody else. If there's a fire because there's an electrical problem somewhere, Public Works and the fire department need to be communicating. Things like that have to be in place before the event, because after the event it's too late to get that in place. And we can't send people back where they have contaminated water or no housing. Is it safe for this person to leave and go home?